Today, we're looking at a brown ink by Rohrer and Klingner, their Document Brown. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, it really does help me for you to check out the entire video. Welcome back. I'm an ink guy. Now, to standardize some of the writing samples, the first three are always done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. And we're going to take a look at that first one, 90 GSM, Clairfontaine. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine, quite a bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, some spots of shading. Jumps, starts a little darker, gets a bit lighter. Quick goes from lighter to darker. Brown goes darker to lighter to dark at the end. 15 seconds to dry. Medium is about the same tone as the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, not bad shading. There's a little bit. Quick goes from a little darker to a little lighter to a little darker. Brown goes darker to lighter to darker. 25 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both far left to far right do show some color variation, which we get. And the smear test, I do not think you could recover it if you smeared while you were writing. To have a range of experience with this ink, the writing samples are all done with the Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, Jinhao X450 with a medium, and a Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then, a Lamy All-Star with a broad nib was inked up, used for a day, and used to take the notes for this video. Now, let's take a look at the second standard paper, 52 GSM, Tomoe River. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 23 seconds to dry. The medium is a little darker than the extra fine, not quite as dark as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade, 38 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both do show a tiny bit of color variation, but it's really not happening in the writing. And the smear test, you probably could not recover it if you smeared while you were writing. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. A line of ink is put down, and then it's put in the water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we do see the outlining of where the line was put down, but then the rest of this brown is really pushing its way up all the way towards the top. It's moving away from the water rather quick. Now the one on the right, where it was allowed to dry for 10 minutes, you really see it all stayed in that line. It bonded with the paper very quickly, which means we should expect some real resistance with this ink. The third standard paper is 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is about the same tone, maybe just a little lighter, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 17 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 28 seconds to dry. The scrubby shows us no color variation, which we're not getting, and the smear test, you probably could not recover that if you smeared while you were writing. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard this ink may be to clean from your pen. This smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it's performing as well as we expected, having looked at that chromatography. This is a really good ink to use in a note-taking situation, especially if you need to be able to go back and highlight. And that's very evident when you see what happens with water, which is nothing. It did nothing to it. Now, the pen flush is really removing it. You see it really have broken it down quite a bit. The surprising part is it did much more than the 1/3 bleach solution, which only lightened up a small space. But it only took water to get this out of my pen. The next writing samples are done on paper that changes up quite a bit just to have an extended range of experience with different papers. This next one is yellow Rhodia paper. The reason for using yellow Rhodia paper is not so much to see the performance change from one to the other, because the performance is usually the same, but to see what kind of tone changes we'll get from that ink with a yellow background. And I wasn't sure if we were going to see a slightly different color, but what we see is lightening throughout. We see that all of these are giving slightly lighter tones, which It still comes through as brown, it still comes through as very readable, but the only thing the yellow did was lighten it up just a little bit. For the inks tested, the average viscosity was 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Rohrer and Klingner's Document Brown has a viscosity of 2.06, making this just a little bit wetter than normal. The next writing sample is done on black and red notebooks. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is a little bit lighter than the stub, with no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade, 8 seconds to dry. Medium is a little darker than the extra fine, a little bit lighter than the stub, with no feather, spread, halo sheen, or shade, and 11 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both don't really show much color variation, but we're not getting it here. In the smear test, I do not think you could recover it if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average dry time was 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Rohrer and Klingner's Document Brown has an average dry time of 24 seconds, meaning it's a little bit slower to dry than normal, but not obscenely slow. The last writing sample is done on white lines paper. Now this paper is not really made for fountain pens, so we do see a lot of bleed spots that are occurring. These bleed spots are enough that I wouldn't want to use the back of the paper as a note taker because it might make what I have a bit too hard to read on both sides. However, it doesn't touch the back of the page. You just can't use the back. That makes for quite a bit of ghosting that is occurring. The 1.1 has a little bit of blurriness from the feathering that's occurring. If you look at the Rohrer, you see a bunch of tiny feathers all over it. It has no spread, halo, sheen, no shade. Now, the extra fine being a little bit lighter than the stub, it also has no feathering. It's performing very well there. Yeah, we did get a bunch of little bleed spots. It has no spread, no halo, sheen, no shade, 6 seconds to dry. Medium is a tad bit darker than the extra fine, with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shade, 7 seconds to dry. The scrubbies do show color variation, though we're not getting it. In the smear test, you could recover it if you smeared while you were writing. So despite not being able to use the back of the page, this is a very good paper with this ink. Instead of finding inks that look like Rohrer and Klingner's Document Brown, I'd prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I went with a red ink by Atramentis, the Kafka Dark Red. So what do I think of Rohrer and Klingner's Document Brown? This is a dull, lifeless color in how it tends to come across. It's very flat. At least it has real permanence, so it has that going for it. Perhaps at the moment of death, it will achieve total enlightenment. So what nib and pen will give the best writing experience with this ink? I think a medium flow fine will do perfectly good because this is a just get the job done type of ink. I hope you got something out of this video, and tomorrow we're going to take a look at Pen BBS number 221.